be a vibration. There will be light. In the darkness.
Hey there, and welcome to Starlight and Shadows, a place for the curious and the quietly hopeful. I'm your host, Robert Bender, storyteller, traveler, and someone just trying to make sense of it all, like you. Each episode is meant to be a light in the dark, a story of hope rising from tough places, a reminder that no matter what we're up against, there's still something good in the world worth holding on to. The world's noisy, messy, and often feels like it's falling apart at the seams. But here, we're not here to escape all that. We're here to face it with open hearts, to talk about what it means to be kind, brave, and real. To look for the light, not because it's easy, but because it matters. So settle in, take a breath, and come along. Let's remember what we're made of, and maybe, just maybe, become something a little more than we were. Welcome to Starlight and Shadows. In today's episode, I sit down with my good friend Josh Armentano to talk about one of the most powerful endings in children's literature, the final moments of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. It's the moment when Charlie, in quotes, wins the whole thing, not by grabbing or clinging, but by giving something back. It's a simple gesture, but it says so much. We explore how that moment can inspire us in real life, how letting go of what we think we need can sometimes open the door for something bigger. So let's dive in. Here's the first episode of Starlight and Shadows. Yeah, you sound great, man.
Cool.
Okay, so I want to talk about, I've been thinking a lot about how this, it's just media in general, like my work has me on the internet a lot, like in social spaces, because that's what storytelling is. It's, inspired by lived experience, And, man, oh man, the internet's going through a dark time. A lot of people are having a hard time. It's hard to find stories of hope, to be honest. It's kind of dark humor. I'm laughing, but it's kind of sad, And I was thinking about this scene from Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, and I wanted to show it to you and show you a couple of metaphors. I'm thinking like we're not telling stories like this anymore. Like this story ends on a very bright, hopeful ending. And we do not have that in our media today, and it's a bummer. And it's like my wife and I don't even watch TV at night anymore. We're just finding weird things to do, and so let me show this to you, and I have some I've cut the following segment of our podcast to ensure all copyright laws are being adhered to. To put it bluntly,
let's just say we'd like to avoid any imperial entanglement.
The following is my take on the scene in Charlie and the Chocolate Factory that Josh and I will be discussing later in the podcast. This is for context and instructional purposes. As the scene plays out, keep in mind the following metaphors. Wonka is divine authority. Charlie is the innocent child that does not know, aka us. His grandfather is human nature, and the candy is the spiritual gift. This scene portrays a fundamental archetype that permeates everything we interact with every day. If we can understand the shape of this archetype, we can begin to understand why good and bad things happen in our lives. Let's enjoy this scene together. After being invited to Wonka's Chocolate Factory for a contest where the winner will receive a lifetime of free chocolate, Charlie and his grandfather found themselves to be the last contestants remaining. They entered Wonka's office to collect the reward to find something was not quite right. Everything in his office was in its proper place, only it was all cut in half. The paintings hanging on the wall were level and properly displayed, except one half was missing. Wonka's desk was cut in half. His chair and even his magnifying glass was cut in half. Wonka was hunched over his desk, writing, and Charlie's grandfather sheepishly approached the man.
Mr. Wonka?
I am extraordinarily busy, sir.
I just wanted to ask about the chocolate. The lifetime supply of chocolate for Charlie. Well, when does he get it?
He doesn't.
Why not?
Because he broke the rules.
What rules? We didn't see any rules, did we, Charlie?
Wrong, sir. Wrong.
Under Section 37B of the contract signed by him, it states quite clearly that all offers shall become null and void if, and you can read it for yourself in this photostatic copy.
Wonka retorted as he stood from his half chair and opened the half door to his half safe. From the half safe, Wonka produced half a contract, which he began reading through with a half magnifying glass.
I, the undersigned, shall forfeit all rights, privileges, and licenses herein and herein contained, etc., etc. Fax mentis incendium gloria culpum, etc., etc. Memo bis punitor delicatum. It's all there, black and white, clear as crystal. You stole fizzy lifting drinks. You bumped into the ceiling, which now has to be washed and sterilized, so you get nothing. You lose. Good day, sir.
Wonka shouted and then returned to his half desk, giving Charlie's grandfather the cold shoulder.
You're a crook.
The man replied.
You're a cheat and a swindler. That's what you are. How can you do a thing like this? Build up a little boy's hopes and then smash all his dreams to pieces. You're an inhuman monster.
I said good day.
Wonka retorted and then immediately returned to his half scribbling on his half parchment at his half desk.
Come on, Charlie. Let's get out of here.
Charlie's grandfather said, clutching the boy's arm and rushing him out of the half office.
I'll get even with him if it's the last thing I ever do. Slugworth wants a gobstopper. He'll get one.
Charlie halted in his tracks at the precipice of revenge. He turned and carefully made his way to Wonka's half desk. The man hunched over, scribbling furiously.
Mr. Wonka?
Charlie hung his head low and placed the stolen gobstopper candy on the half desk and walked away. Wonka's scribbling ceased, and his hand fell gently on the candy that was returned.
So shines a good deed in a weary world.
Wonka turned quickly, his dark mood evaporating.
Charlie.
My boy.
You won! You did it! You did it! I knew you would! I just knew you would! Oh, Charlie, forgive me for putting you through this. Please, forgive me. Come in, Mr. Wilkinson.
From the office's side door, the man that Charlie knew as Slugworth, an executive of a rival candy company who wanted to steal Wonka's company secrets, entered.
Charlie, meet Mr. Wilkinson.
Pleasure.
He said cordially.
Slugworth.
No, that's not Slugworth. He works for me.
For you?
I had to test you, Charlie, and you passed the test. You won!
Here's an interesting fact. The Latin that Wonka rattles off when reciting the contract details translates to, "The mind's light is the fire of glory." And, remember, twice the punishment is nice. Okay, with this scene set in its proper context, we can now return to the discussion.
Been a long time since I've seen that movie.
Yeah. So what do you think, man?
Yeah, that's a good scene, man. That's a classic scene. You know, I think I love the plot twist there. I also, you know, you got the dad or the grandpa or whatever the old man is to the boy, saying the revenge narrative, basically. You know, he wronged us, and therefore we're gonna wrong him. You know, that's the narrative of the world.
Yeah.
That's the tit for tat, eye for an eye. That's what's expected.
Yeah.
That's what Wonka expects. And the boy playing the part of presenting an alternative to perceived wrongs, perceived slights, perceived injustice against you, with kind of like honor and nobility, taking a higher road. That's the message of the gospel. You know, I mean, I think that it reminds me when Jesus says, you know, when somebody wrongs you, the disciples are like, how many times should we forgive them? You know, 7 times, you know, or you know, that's supposed to be like a lot, you know, at some point. The implication is that we no longer need to forgive the person who's wronged us, because it becomes unreasonable at that point. And Jesus says 7 times 70, like it just doesn't end.
Right.
In terms of your ability and capacity and what you ought to do in those moments to offer a better way of forgiveness in that instance. So yeah, man, I think that it's good. It's good. But here's the other thing too. I think when you mentioned that we don't hear these stories anymore, or they're not promoted very much in kind of typical media outlets or this or that. I think part of the reason why that is because those stories we're like, yeah, that's just not real life. It's like that. So like the Wonka story, like what the scene that we just saw, and the boy does the right thing, and he gets rewarded. But the cynic in us is like, well, that's usually not what happens.
That's not real, right?
That's
right.
not real. So we don't like so we dismiss these stories when they do pop up. These feel good stories. We're like, well, that's not real life. So I don't know how to interact with that any longer, because real life to me is the rich and the powerful and the ones who have, justice never comes for them, and the ones that are the downtrodden who are subject to injustice, they're the ones that always will just continually be stepped on, and that's just life, and that's a cynical way to look, and that's not good.
I see that as it's a material way to look at it. The wealthy, those who have things and stuff and bank accounts and infrastructures to manipulate and use, it's a material way to look at it, right? So if you're saying, oh, well, I'm a little guy, I don't have all the stuff that these successful in quotes people have, it's like, well, okay, you need to start looking at the immaterial things, right? That's sort of what the candy is, the metaphor. Mm-hmm. That's like this is the gift, and Charlie he stole the gift, So, and he was just going to take it for himself and just say, I'm going to be this person by myself that has the thing, the candy, the gift, and it's going to be mine. And he gives it willingly, right? So from an immaterial perspective, when you're in that position of humble humility, you don't have much, and you give willingly anyways, that's how you win, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's the message, the hopeful message at the end of this story,
Oh, totally. What's the exchange there? The exchange is he's doing the right thing. He's giving the candy back. So he's foregoing the material reward the candy's going to provide him and his family. But is he winning in that exchange? And we would say, yeah, he's actually winning. He's actually going to experience life in a more robust way as a result of sacrificing a material gain, a ill-got material gain, for this like spiritual thing of doing the honorable thing of giving something back that didn't belong to you, and the benefits that's gonna accrue in his heart, in his life, and the way it's going to shape his personality and his perspective, and the way it's going to make him even more able and capable in the future when he has another crossroads moment where he has to choose right or wrong. He's gonna be more inclined and able to choose the right way, the right choice, and pass that on to other people who know his story. And that's the other piece about what I love about the storytelling, is that we can benefit vicariously through the examples of others when we see instances like even in a movie of somebody doing the hard choice and doing the right thing, even though foregoing the material reward potential, for a more spiritual reward, if you will, that's more compelling.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I think what I'm getting from that is like, okay, so from this scene, like, okay, we know how to win, in quotes. Being in a humble position and giving anyways is how you're gonna win. But it seems to me like, I don't want to get into a combative stance, but that's discouraged deliberately. It's focus on the career path and the promotion and the salary and the benefits and this very material hierarchy. This is what you look at, this is what you focus on, and everything's kind of designed around not being able to shift away from that. I could say from my personal experience, it was very difficult and traumatic at times to kind of veer off of that path. I essentially had to burn everything to the ground, to put it simply, just to get away from that lifestyle of, you are the laborer, and I don't know, but Where am I going with
When
this?
you're-
I lost my train of
Well,
thought.
you're right. If the dominant narrative in your culture, and this certainly is the case in America, is to advancement, pursue career, go up the corporate ladder, extend your bank account, promotion and promoting yourself, and all of these things, building yourself up essentially in all these material ways. If that's your narrative and that's what you swim in and that's the pond that you're in, it's almost impossible to not have that impact even if you see that as, no, that is not the way I think life ought to be lived, and those are not the things that I think ought to be prioritized in the way that they are, and give my life away for the sake of these things, notoriety and money and esteem and power and all these things. Even if you have that inclination, it's hard when you're in the midst of it, when you're in when it's everywhere. To not even at a subconscious level fall into that mentality, think in those ways.
Oh yeah, I still do
view
that
people
sometimes.
in those ways.
Yeah.
And so what do we do? Well, I think part of the solution to that is you surround yourself with people, not exclusively, but you have your core people think this way with you and are calling you into these better ways and are sharing the stories of how it's been impactful for them to not view their career as this, or to not view their social media profile as this, but instead to invest in other things, in other domains. So that's why, I think that's why community, like what we're doing here with these talks and just walking through life together in a church environment, if that's what you're in, is so valuable, man, so valuable.
It's a tricky balance, I think, though, because you want to say to yourself, oh, these X and X person, so person are bad for me in my life, and I have to just turn away and leave them, and it's I have to cut them out of my life. But it's like, what if that's like your family member? What if that's your parent?
For sure.
You know what I mean? And it's like, you can't just always leave people, and walk away. It's very difficult depending on the relationship you're having. And then where's the line between, I want to help all these people and I want to do the giving thing, but this person is not into it, but you're just going to keep banging your head against the wall and it's not getting anywhere, that kind of thing. It's a tricky, confusing balance sometimes when our interpersonal relationships get,
You think about that corporate gathering. If the church is going to be that place where you're going to find that support to keep going down this narrow road, if you will. What throughout the week, man, I love this metaphor of like throughout the week, you're out there in the world, you're interacting with a toxic relationship family member, you're in the work environment with people who aren't like you, or that maybe they are, but maybe they're encouraging you to do things you don't want to do, or maybe they're not, right? You're kind of out there, and a lot of things are out of your control. And if you're not going to be a hermit and just huddle up in your house all day long and never be exposed to these things, you're going to be exposed to these things. And Monday through Friday, you're exposed to these things in all these ways, and they're damaging you in ways, and they're harming you, and they're shifting your worldview back to what culture tells you, and all these things are happening throughout the week. And so what do we do? Well, on the Sunday rolls around, and the people who are like-minded gather together, and a person steps up in front of them and starts to preach to them this better way, this better narrative. And it's almost as if that process of gathering with the people of the church, people of God, is putting you back together. It's like Humpty Dumpty fell off the wall. Your week is Humpty Dumpty.
Yeah.
And it's been kind of scattered, and the pieces are kind of all over the place. And Sunday comes, and the church gathers, and you kind of get put back together a little bit.
Yeah.
And reoriented. And then you go back out.
And then you're refreshed, ready for another week.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's how it should be. And we need that. We need that regular rhythm of kind of recalibrating, being put back together.
Man, oh man.
Because people need people who have this view in mind. People need to be around people who have this worldview, right? That's countercultural. That's almost an upside down worldview. And we have the capacity to be a blessing and a help to a lot of people who don't have this perspective and who are viewing the world through the lens of how the culture is training them to view it. So yeah, man, that's and so those toxic relationships, the family ones, the stuff that you know, they're your responsibility regardless because they're family kind of a thing.
Yeah.
You know, they need us, and in order for us to be there for them, man, we need to be doing these rhythms to keep ourselves steady.
You know, my relationships with my parents and siblings are doing pretty good right now, but it's been rocky in the past, for sure. But I think seeing that improved over time, because there's certain relationships I don't think that we can just walk away from, right?
Yep.
And so that's where it becomes clear. You don't want to admit it to yourself, but it becomes clear. That's where you do the give. You give the candy. That's where you give, and then and then get back in return. And that's the hardest one too, because there's so many people in the world that you're like, oh yeah, that person needs help, but you have like 9 degrees of separation from that person. So it's easy to just be like, I'm not going to answer that phone call, or
sure.
That kind of thing. It's not as intense. So I think that over time, with the family interpersonal relationships, it's just patience and don't get mad. Get mad, but don't say things you regret because you can't take those words back. That kind of thing.
Totally.
Yeah.
And going back to our the Wonka scene.
Yeah.
It's great because he gets rewarded for doing the right thing, right? And so and that's wonderful. And you think about from the family member's perspective, who wanted vengeance, who chose of the two paths, chose the path of the world would tell you, go and leverage whatever that little thing that you stole and make money and stick it to Wonka because he's unfair and blah blah blah. And then he sees the outcome of doing the honorable thing, and the impact that's going to have on him, to reframe how he views, just those types of situations of injustice and whatnot. But oftentimes that's not how it works. The injustice doesn't get righted, or you don't receive that expected benefit of doing the right thing, of being honorable, and so that's I think that's part of the cynicism that we have with these kind of stories. It's like, well, that's just not real life. It doesn't work out like it worked out with Wonka, and so
in that story, the reward for that victory is immediate. It's instant.
Yeah.
He's just immediate. You did it, you win. And in life, it's not always instant. It's not always immediate. And oftentimes, at least in my experience, it's tiny givings. It's tiny little victories that have to build up. And then you'll get a milestone, and then it's right back to the little things, and it's just a long grind. And that's, you don't really get that from the scene we watched. It's compacted into 4 minutes. And it portrays
and what's crazy is that's what we've been trained to expect, man. If we don't get that reward in that 4 minute period of time in life, we're like, the long game, the slow thing that you're describing is just not. Our culture doesn't operate that way. It doesn't see things that way, and we got to remind ourselves of that. It's a long grind. So, but it's good. It's good work. It's good. These little victories. That was a victory for that boy. The reward was secondary. The primary, I think everybody would agree, was that act of giving that piece of candy back and doing the right thing. That was a monumental victory, and we got to celebrate that.
Yeah, I think, part of what we're doing, I don't know what it becomes, but it's got to be more stories like that is what I'm getting. That's the feeling I'm getting from this, is like there's not enough spaces on the internet doing things like this. Generally, it's, this setup with two people talking, but they're either attacking the negativity or they are the negativity,
Isn't that true? So true.
So it's not, I don't want to talk about Tesla fires and all the whatever news feeds are coming out. That's not my jam. My jam is collecting stories that are hopeful and portray the positive archetypes that we wish to embody in our lives. Either true stories or fiction, like this one, doesn't matter to me. But that's I guess that's just where I see this thing going. And I try not to get too deep into biblical stuff because I'm not qualified. I'm learning about ethical interpretations. There's a wrong way to say it, and I don't want to get myself into trouble. I don't know. You're a little more experienced than me, so it's all good.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. I mean, but and so you have this worldview it's a work in progress. This ethical, mindset. It's a kind of an evolving thing, and I think that's how it is for a lot of people. And I think there's probably a lot of things that we would say that's right and that's wrong, and it's pretty objective, But there's a lot of gray stuff out there that requires wisdom, and the worldview is important. So that's the other thing that I would think of, like with these stories. There's a sense in which we're operating from a position that says there is a right and a wrong in the various interactions we have with people and the various things that we do in life. There's a moral and there's an immoral, right? And so the culture wants that to be, well, your moral is different than my moral, so we got to respect. But for the Christian, the one who says, I believe that there's a moral that supersedes kind of what we think it ought to be, and I want to reorient my life around that. And so these stories, that we highlight, I'm excited to identify those, those aspects of the story that I'm like, that's just truth. It's just truth. There's truth there, and this is what I think. This is how I see it. And it's not based off of what I think truth is. It's based off of what a book essentially says truth is, and it's kind of my lens that I view these stories through. So, so I think that's exciting, man. Especially in a world that's so nebulous with people who are not willing to, or they're scared to kind of say, oh, I think this is actually, there's truth and there's right and there's wrong. And I'll go out there and say it. Yeah, I think that.
Yeah, I think that's something that kind of weighs heavy on me as a storyteller, and like with my novels that I'm writing. It's like would be so easy to slip into that negative mindset. It would be so easy for me to create a character that is closely related to a real life figure out there, and then just start writing vitriol through fiction, and that's sort of, that is the temptation I have to fight every time I sit down at my computer. Is not okay. It's not taking sides concerning the material dramas that are happening, and what is true, and saying it like it is.
Yeah.
And sometimes the truth hurts. Sometimes it's difficult to read or even write. Those two novels were hard for me to write. There were some truths in there that I was working through still, and through writing it helped me do that kind of thing. But I'm at a place where this final story is really that I'm trying to get that Wonka ending. How do I make that happen? Is what I'm trying to figure that out. So
what a great challenge, though. Yeah. You talk about a noble ambition, man. I want to tell a story that has these elements in them that I think are going to be really helpful to whoever ends up reading the story and engages with the material. And but I love that. I love the idea of truth teller. That's sort of becoming, I guess, a buzzword in the political world, in the just this media world. Is anybody going to be courageous enough to be a truth teller? And truth teller, as I understand it, is this idea of, it's like the emperor has no clothes, right? It's like if your tribe or your group or whoever you're part of, if you view them with such rosy-eyed glasses that you can't see all their faults and all the things that aren't okay and aren't good and aren't right, then how useful can you be? But the truth teller is the one that is, man, I want to go after truth, and so where I see it, I want to elevate it and I want to promote it, and it might be in the other camp's side, and the way that this person who's different than me views the situation or whatever, and be subordinate to truth as opposed to just your people or your tribe, and so your political party. So yeah, there's like a higher ideal, and I think that's what we should be thinking about and trying to find.
Yeah. I just remembered this. I think this is Alan Watts. I'm paraphrasing. He said, "Righteousness is not aware of itself as righteousness, because then it wouldn't be righteous."
Lao Tzu, the Chinese philosopher, said, "The highest virtue is not virtue, and therefore really is virtue. But inferior virtue cannot let go of being virtuous, and therefore is not virtue." Translated in more of a periphrastic way,
The highest virtue is not conscious of itself as virtue, and therefore really is virtue. The highest virtue is not conscious of itself as virtue, and therefore really is virtue. Lower virtue is so self-conscious that it's not virtue. That it's not virtue.
Or you could say, beware the man who proclaims himself to be righteous, because by doing that in itself means you are not righteous. Because the road to hell is paved with good intentions by self-proclaimed righteous men, right? So that sort of, I'm trying not to get too deep into what am I, who am I, what am I doing, like, let me label myself on my social media. I'm the truth teller. Like, the minute I say that, I am not. You know, that's the tricky game.
Good.
That's the tricky game we're playing is I know, the moment I say I know, I do not know.
Yeah, so you think about like that goes to intentions, right? And so it's like, where's the motivation behind the desire to be a truth teller, to be somebody who does that, or to be somebody who lives a life that is a life that's worthy of living, right? Is it for the sake of doing it because it's the right thing to do, or is it because of that virtue signaling, mentality that's so prevalent?
Virtue signaling is what I was trying to say.
And but look, we don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. So while there's that tension that we don't want to go down that road of promoting our truth telling or promoting our righteous living to bring glory to ourselves, to bring attention to ourselves, to make people think good about us, we don't want that. That's toxic and poison, right?
Yeah.
But we also don't want to be like, well, then the alternative, I just got to step back, and you do you, and I'll do me. That's what the world's going to tell you. That's what one side of our country, half our country, is going to tell you. You be you, and I'll be me. And I'm not going to speak into you because you got your truth and I got my truth, right? And so that's the other side of that pendulum. And so I was like, man, we need to be right in the middle, right? We need to be people who are. We're not about self-promotion, but we're also like, no, there is a better way.
Yeah.
There is a better way, and I'm willing to say it in love. I want to attempt. Let me rephrase that. I want to attempt to communicate that better way to you, person who I care about, in love. And it might not be something that you want to hear.
Yeah, right. It oftentimes is not.
And oftentimes it's not.
But that's what we need. It would be nice to just be given laurels all day, every day for our good actions. But, we're not always aware of our own stuff. It's easy to look at others and be like, oh, that person is crazy, but you yourself are also doing things that are not,
That's so good.
You're learning.
So you say, how do you protect yourself from going down the road of the virtue signaler, the holier than thou, is you have a clear-eyed view of yourself. You know yourself, and you know all the things that aren't good, all the thoughts that aren't charitable, all the words that you say that hurt and cut, and the things you think that you'd be ashamed to show on a TV screen in front of your friends.
Oh yeah.
Right. So you have this balancing act, and so much of it is that self-analysis that you're bringing up.
I look at I can't remember exactly how it goes, but the world reflects at you what's happening inside. So when you look at a person and you see a person, oh, that person is, there was can't even remember her name. There's a Gen Z pop star recently who came out and said, parenting is hell.
But kids, all of my friends who have kids are in hell. I actually don't know anyone who's like happy and has children at this age. I have like a 1-year-old, like 3-year-old, 4 and under, 5 and under. I literally have not met anyone who's happy, anyone who has like light in their eyes, anyone who has slept.
And that went all over the news feeds and the social media. And a lot of parents are like, yes, it is. Parenting is hell. I'm like, oh my goodness. No, why would you say that, first of all?
Yeah.
You know, and it's like this person, this girl, she's looking at the world. That indicates to me she herself inside is in hell. She is seeing hell because it's happening inside of her. And so that, to me, when you look at people and you see negative things, it's like, look at yourself. Why are you seeing that? The world's showing you something, you know?
Yeah.
And that's kind of my forward in my second book. People may interpret things incorrectly than I intended. And it's like, if you're feeling negative thoughts reading this, look at yourself. Why are you feeling that? You know? So that's good. I think that's how you protect yourself from the holier than thou archetype, you know, becoming that. Yeah.
Totally. And you think about it, I mean, some of the stuff you shared previous about, you know, the mood you're in, it changes the way you write and the way the story unfolds and all of these things, you know. I think we'd all be like, oh yeah, I can see that. Yeah, I can acknowledge that as a true thing. And so, so all this stuff, man, you know, and so we share these stories, we have these conversations, we shake ourselves up. Oh, that's right. Okay. Yep. That's right.
Yeah.
All those things that I was beginning to believe again about, you know, parenting is hell or whatever.
Yeah.
No, it's not. Okay. So let's continue moving down this narrow way, and calling people to join us along the way.
Yeah. That's the tough part. This is, you know, I've had a lot of nervousness and maybe a little bit of fear about doing this, because now I have to essentially be that person inviting people to do the process to get here to this point where you're happy and you're able to look at yourself and keep yourself from, you know, getting off the path you want to be on. It's like that process to get there is super tough. At least for me, it was.
Yep.
It was brutal at times, you know. And you come up for air briefly and things are calm for a minute and then you're back in it and it's intense and heavy and, you know, but it's hard to invite people knowing that people are going to do that. Oftentimes the people don't know, but to invite someone to say, hey, come do this really hard thing, you know, that's and I'm nervous about that because also now I don't know who's going to watch this, you know? And so now it's sort of opening up my own thoughts and opinions to public opinion, which we know how that goes, you know. But you know, that's judgmental. Maybe I'm I don't know. See, now I'm getting all wrapped around the axle.
You're being a realist, but then the cynicism creeps in.
That cynicism crept in there, getting wrapped around the axle. But it's a nervous thing to do that, to try and dare I say be righteous publicly, you know. Tricky business.
Brother, and that 100%, to be able to utter these words like Paul uttered these words, follow me, come follow me. He calls the people that he was doing life with in the letters that he was writing to the churches, he was saying, follow my example. Whoa, what a statement. Who would have the courage to tell other people, look at my life. Come, I want you to come into the intimate aspects of my life. See what I do. See how I interact with people. See how I love my wife or my kids. See how I repent when I screw up. See these things. I invite you to come into that and do as I do. That's a crazy thing to say. You know, people say that's presumptuous of you. Who are you that you would be such an example to other people? that you would invite them to do life like you do life, like you're some kind of crazy example of a stellar moral person, blah blah blah, right? I mean, I feel that tension for sure, but the Christian is supposed to do that. They're supposed to come and imitate me.
Yeah. Hold, I'm sorry. One second, please. I gotta help my kid here.
Yep.
Okay. Sorry about that. His show ended. Yeah. No, I didn't mean to cut you off there, but I think what you're saying is it is tough to oftentimes to be the public figure, at least in the United States, is a selfish thing. It is often a self-serving thing.
It is.
And it's hard to tell the difference. That's kind of the game I feel like we're playing as modern humans, is looking at who is self-serving. Because at this point, it is often everyone's pretending to be righteous as well. It's not just the man who thinks he's righteous, it's also the man who's pretending to be righteous, even though he's not. And so we're having to develop this discernment to figure out what is going on, what is actually true. And it's super difficult. So I would even say online, through my research, there is even fake Christian things happening. So you find a Christian thing, you're like, oh, this feels good, and it's just a person. I don't know the verses. I think Jesus said it, where the false prophets will come. I don't know what number that is, but that kind of thing is, and it's not just in Christianity; it's in permeating in everything. Not just in spiritual, but like in media, in sports, and whatever your thing is that you like. There's the imitation of truth.
Totally. It's the Instagram generation, where the Instagram feed is all the good stuff, and the life presented online and in the public sphere is all the good stuff. All the bad stuff, all the grumbling disposition, all the hateful thoughts, all the behind the scenes bickering, and all the behaviors that we do, that all of us do, that we don't want no one to see, and when they do see a glimpse of it, we're terribly embarrassed, or we pretend as though it never happened, and we do the whole gaslighting thing. That's the stuff that we don't see that. We don't see that anywhere. And so how are we to know when somebody comes up and they seem like they're a really good person, and they have good motivations for the things that they're doing, and yada, yada, yada. But we don't know. We don't know how he treats his wife.
Yeah, right.
We don't know the amount of attention he gives to his kids. We don't know if his hobbies are more important to him than his family, right? We don't know any of these things based off of what we're seeing on the Instagram feed or on the YouTube video, And so how do we know? Well, ultimately, I suppose we can't. I think one of the indicators that they are the real deal, maybe, is their willingness to acknowledge their mistakes and their screw-ups and their sin. And they're wrong. That's probably a pretty good place to start.
Yeah. Well, I think, going back to the Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, that archetype is, once you understand that process, and that process, you can begin to identify that pattern in life, in reality. You can see it in people and organizations and things. It is applied to essentially everything. To get into scientific realms, we exist in a field of relativity. Things grow, they peak, and then they decay. And so we see, reaching a peak, a zenith, and then we decay a little bit, and then we're up to another peak, and that's sort of the shape things take. And someone who's doing life truthfully or righteously, if you will, is going to be on that pattern. And you can, I think, after enough time of doing your own stuff and spiritually growing, you can recognize it, and you can see it easily. Like you're lying to yourself, man. Like you could just see it and feel like you're lying, like you're not even aware of it. Like, and once you recognize the pattern, that whatever divine authority pattern that you see in everything, you can see it in people easily. But it takes a lot of time and a lot of work on yourself, first of all. And you don't judge people for that either. Shouldn't do that. But you see it, and you have that discernment.
And the way that you see it, because you see it in yourself first.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
You know the little hallmarks of the prideful heart or the selfish heart, because you are the ones fighting against your own prideful, selfish heart. You know, and so now the person is not self-aware, which is, it seems like a lot of people, unfortunately. They probably don't see it, you know, as clearly. But I think the person who's fighting to be self-aware, you're right. He's going to see those patterns, and she's going to see those patterns. They're going to develop that sixth sense, that spidey sense, if you will, and be like, oh, that person is just, there's just something that's not quite right. I'm not going to allow them to disciple me and inform my view on X, Y, and Z. I think that's the problem with a lot of Christians who aren't self-aware, and they, you know, we talk about the political realm. They'll get some people on media who they'll allow to disciple them, to tell them how to think about X, Y, and Z. And so that's dangerous. So we got to be discerning, man. But it starts with us. It starts with the work done in your own life, introspection, analysis of why.
And so if it's, I would say, like, if the idea of religion might make a lot of people uncomfortable. I'm not really framing this podcast as a, in quotes, Christian podcast, although it comes up naturally and I love it. It's fine. But I would say, even if that idea of religion makes you uncomfortable, that's okay. Don't go there. Still look at yourself. Still start that process. You know what I mean? You don't have to address concepts of God and Christ or whatever, you know. Don't do that. You don't feel like you're uncomfortable, don't do that. But still look at yourself and be honest, what's wrong with me? You know? That's kind of, I think, where I started with all of this, is just having the humility to say, okay, I'm not happy. Things aren't where I want them to be. What's wrong with me? Not, you know, I had this Instagram account a long time ago when I was working in construction. This was probably like 8 years ago at this point. It's gone now. I hope it's been deleted. I hope it's not there. But and I would get on there and do these video rants of what's wrong with the world and why everything's wrong. And not useful for anyone. Useful for me because I'm working through it, you know what I mean? So you work through your stuff, have conversations with yourself about how do I improve to make things externally improve. So if you're not comfortable with religion, then don't be. You know, that's kind of like the approach I take with it.
That's good, man. And I think that to add to that word to those people who are in that place, the world will tell you, and it seems like it's becoming a more dominant voice, that there is nothing wrong with you. You know, you do X, Y, Z, you have some behavioral patterns that you don't think are very helpful, but ultimately, I mean, it's not your fault, or it's environmental stuff or this or that. And I would say, I would say that should be rejected. I think there are some instances of suppose where environmental factors are the dominant, you know, ingredient into why you behave the way you behave in ways that you don't like. But ultimately, it comes down to you, you know, and you're the one making the choices to be irritable with your kid, or you're the one who's making the choice to slack off at work and leave half an hour early every day, or you're the one who's doing these things, and these things are wrong. And until you fess up and be like, man, that's wrong. I mean, you can try to medicate it with excuses and all the rest, but I think that's the goal, anyways. That's the ideal, I would say. Be like, own what needs to be owned in your life. And that'll be a good place to start for sure.
Yeah, man. Doing that internally. And then I always think about health, eating healthy, you know, exercising. That's a key factor. You're not going to feel good about yourself and positive about yourself if your body doesn't feel good. And that's the other difficulty, I think, if we're critiquing society still, is the surplus of delicious foods that are not good for us.
We're blessed, but also cursed with abundance.
So you can't feel good about yourself if your body doesn't feel good. That's my whole thing, and that's a hard thing to let go of. Some of the vices. I used to do chewing tobacco. I used to do chewing tobacco in the Marines. Every day. I was on a ship going from Japan to Thailand for like 8 weeks, and my tobacco ran out. I didn't have any, and I was just on a naval ship in the ocean, and I was the worst. I was the worst.
Talk about being irritable.
Yeah, I was the worst human being to be around. And well, I was working on the mess deck too, so I was doing dishes like 12 hours a day, no tobacco because I'm addicted to it. Like I was the worst person ever. You know, I admit that. But that, looking at also what we're consuming and putting into ourselves, is affecting also how we view the world.
Yeah.
I don't know where I was going with that, but
yeah. I mean, you're more than just your thoughts. You're your body as well, and you know that caretaking piece includes your body. You know, treating it the way it needs to be treated, getting your sleep and eating good and all that stuff. Yeah, man, all that stuff it helps. It helps to get you in the frame of mind and to live in the space to actually do the hard work of dealing with your junk and taking steps in the right direction, you know, on that narrow road. So
I hope you enjoyed this episode, but just because the episode's ending doesn't mean the story's over. If something we talked about stuck with you, if Charlie's quiet moment of courage made you think about your own life, hold on to that. Let it simmer. Let it grow. We're not here to run away from the world. We're here to meet it, to shape it, to bring a little light back into it, one small moment at a time. Thanks for being with me. Thanks, Josh, for your insights and your heart. And thank you, listener, for showing up and staying open. Until next time, keep learning from your shadows, keep reaching towards your light, and don't forget, even the smallest light can cut through the deepest dark. I'm Robert Bender. This has been the Starlight and Shadow Podcast. If today's episode spoke to you and you want to support the podcast, there's a really easy way to do that. Check out my Medium page at r.e.bender. Link is in the description below. There, I write articles about the craft of writing and spiritual truths, and have a growing collection of sci-fi and fantasy short stories. And if you haven't already, hit like, subscribe, and the notification bell so you don't miss the next episode, or follow us on Spotify if you're listening on the go. Thanks again for being here. I'll see you next time.